Imagine the man you've dedicated your life to. The fiancé you think is your savior is actually the one who put a price on your head. Mira Jada was days away from her happily ever after until the cold click of a gun shattered her world. While she was picking out flowers, her fiancé, Jackie Hu, was busy using her as collateral to pay off a gambling debt. Now, the most ruthless mafia boss in the Korean underworld, Will Chang, has come to collect. He didn't just crash her life, he claimed her soul. But in a world of predators, is he her captor or her only hope for survival? Before we dive into this dark obsession, subscribe, like, and share. Comment "Keeper" below and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single chapter of Mira's revenge. In the neon-drenched streets of the underworld, loyalty is a lie and love is the ultimate currency. Will Chang is a man who rules with an iron fist, and his latest obsession is a woman who doesn't even know she's a pawn. Mira is a hard-working maid, a woman trapped by her own gratitude toward a man who doesn't deserve her. She believes Jackie Hu saved her from a dark past, but she's blind to the fact that he's already moved on to the daughter of a rival family, Kim Yoon. When Will Chang drags Mira into his opulent mountain castle, he doesn't just bring luxury, he brings a suffocating obsession. He tells her she belongs to him now, locked away from the world she once knew. But Mira isn't just a submissive maid, she's a fighter. As the blood feud between the Chang and Stanley families ignites, Mira is caught in a lethal crossfire. She is forced to decide: stay loyal to the man who sold her like a piece of property, or trust the monster who is the only one standing between her and a shallow grave. Was Will's obsession a cage, or was he the only one truly willing to bleed for her? Let's pull back the curtain on this high-stakes tale of betrayal, underworld power, and a maid who became a mafia queen. The air in the small apartment was thick with the scent of cheap jasmine candles and the lingering warmth of a shared dinner, a domestic bliss Mira Jada clung to with desperate fervor. She smoothed the lace of her modest white collar, her mind drifting to the wedding dress hanging in the closet, a symbol of the peaceful life she was certain Jackie Hu had provided for her. She owed him everything. He was the one who had pulled her from the shadows of her past, and in return, she would be the perfect, loyal wife. A sudden sharp metallic click at the front door shattered the silence. Before Mira could even stand, the door swung open with a heavy, deliberate thud. The man who stepped inside didn't belong in her world. He was a vision of cold, expensive precision in a matte black tailored suit that seemed to swallow the dim light of the hallway. Will Chang scanned the room with intense, predatory eyes, his presence instantly making the apartment feel like a birdcage. "Who are you? What do you want?" Mira's voice trembled, her hand flying to her throat. "I'm here for a collection, Mira," Will said, his voice a low, melodic growl that vibrated in the small space. He moved toward her with a terrifying, liquid grace, closing the distance until she was backed against the wall. "You have the wrong place. My fiancé, Jackie, he isn't here," she stammered, her eyes wide and glassy with rising terror. Will leaned in, his face inches from hers. She could smell the faint, high-end scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and steel. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of a single glistening tear that had begun to streak down her warm-toned skin. "Oh, I know exactly where Jackie is," Will whispered into her ear, his stern expression never wavering. "He's currently at a baccarat table in my casino, betting money he doesn't have. And when he ran out of chips, he offered me something else. Something he claimed was his most valuable possession." "No!" Mira gasped, the word catching in her throat. "Jackie loves me." He saved me. Will chuckled, a dark, humorless sound. He didn't save you, little bird. He just put you in a different kind of cage until the market price went up. Tonight, his debt came due, and I decided to accept his collateral. He gripped her arm, not with cruelty, but with an absolute, terrifying sense of ownership. Pack nothing. From this moment on, you don't belong to a debtor. You belong to the Tucker family. As he led her toward the door, the jasmine candle flickered and died, leaving Mira in the shadows of a man whose obsession was only just beginning. The heavy iron gates of the mountain stronghold groaned shut behind them, sounding like the final gavel of a life sentence. Mira pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the sedan, watching the jagged peaks of the Korean wilderness swallow the world she once knew. Beside her, Will Chang sat in a silence so thick it felt predatory, the orange glow of the dashboard carving his sharp features into a mask of terrifying perfection. When the car stopped at the foot of the sprawling stone castle, Will didn't wait for his men. He leaned in, his breath ghosting over Mira's ear as she stared forward in pure terror. "Your old life died at that apartment door, Mira," he murmured, his voice a low melodic threat. "In this house, there is no Jackie Who. There is only me." Mira was led through vaulted corridors of polished marble and deep shadows, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The opulence was suffocating. Every corner of the gilded cage was designed to remind her of her own insignificance. She was taken to a chamber that looked more like a museum than a bedroom, filled with deep blacks and rich ambers that mirrored the man who held the key. On the bed lay a dark garment with a delicate white lace collar, the uniform of a personal maid. "Strip," Will commanded from the doorway, his eyes wide and glassy with an intensity that made Mira's skin crawl. "I have a life, Will. I have a wedding next week," she whispered, a single glistening tear streaking down her cheek. Her voice trembled, still clinging to the misplaced loyalty she felt for the man she thought had saved her years ago. Will stepped into the light, the teal and orange hues of the room defining the predatory edge of his expression. "You have a debt," he corrected, his hand reaching out to catch the tear on her face with a terrifyingly gentle touch. "Jackie sold you for 30 pieces of silver and a clean slate. You aren't a bride anymore, Mira. You are my obsession." He threw a heavy embroidered handkerchief onto the vanity, a piece of silk marked with the Tucker family crest. Mira stared at it, her breath hitching. It was the same crest she had seen in her dreams, the one she thought belonged to Jackie. As the realization of her isolation began to sink in, Will leaned closer, trapping her between his gaze and the cold reality of her new existence. She was no longer a woman with a future. She was a prized possession, locked away in a castle of stone and secrets, forced to serve the very monster she feared most. The heavy oak doors of the master suite felt more like the bars of a cell than the entrance to a sanctuary. Inside Will Chang's mountain castle, the air was thick with the scent of sandalwood and expensive cologne, a constant reminder of the man who now claimed to own her. Mira paced the length of the plush rug, her eyes darting to the window where the jagged peaks of the Korean landscape stood like silent sentinels. She was trapped in luxury, a bird in a gilded cage, still reeling from the revelation that her life had been a series of transactions she never authorized. A sharp, rhythmic vibration from the pocket of her lace-collared garment made her heart leap. It was the phone she had managed to hide, the one Will's men had overlooked during the collection. She retreated into the shadows of the velvet curtains and pressed the device to her ear. "Mira, thank God," a voice hissed. It was Jackie. Relief washed over her, momentarily blinding her to the reality of her situation. "Jackie? Where are you? Are you safe? Will said... He said you sold me." Her voice trembled, a single tear beginning to track through the dust and terror on her cheek. "Don't listen to that monster, baby. He's trying to get into your head," Jackie urged, though his tone lacked the frantic desperation of a man trying to save his bride. "Listen, I'm working on a plan to get you out, but I need your help. Chang is powerful, and the only way to break his grip is to hit him where it hurts." Mira wiped her eye, her hope flickering like a dying candle. "What do I need to do? Tell me." "He has a study on the 3rd floor. In the safe, or maybe on his desk, there are black financial ledgers. They contain the digital keys to his offshore accounts and the names of his silent partners," Jackie whispered, his voice growing cold and clinical. "If you can get those for me, I can leverage them. I can force him to let you go. I can pay off everything and we can finally be free." The warmth Mira felt at hearing his voice began to chill. She remembered the way Will had leaned into her ear, his predatory eyes filled with a terrifying sort of honesty. "Jackie, it's dangerous. If he catches me..." "You have to do this, Mira. Do you want to stay his pet forever?" Jackie's voice sharpened, the mask of the doting fiancé slipping to reveal the desperate gambler underneath. "Think about everything I've done for you. You owe me this. Just get the ledgers. I'll be waiting at the south gate at midnight. Don't fail me." The line went dead. Mira stared at the darkened screen, the weight of the phone feeling like a lead weight. Jackie hadn't asked if she was hurt. He hadn't told her he loved her. He had only given her a mission. As she looked toward the door, she realized the ghost of her past was just as haunting as the man currently holding the key to her room. The heavy iron doors of the great hall groaned open, admitting a gust of cold mountain air and the sharp, rhythmic click of designer heels against the marble floor. Mira, who had been meticulously polishing the silver under the watchful eyes of Will's guards, froze as a woman draped in white silk and smelling of expensive lilies strode into the room. This was Kim Yoon. Even without an introduction, Mira recognized the lethal grace of the rival family's daughter. Her presence in the Tucker stronghold was a declaration of war in itself. "So, this is the little stray Will decided to cage?" Kim Yoon drawled, her voice dripping with a condescending sweetness that set Mira's nerves on fire. She stopped inches from Mira, her predatory gaze sweeping over the delicate lace collar of the maid's uniform. "You look quite pathetic in black, darling. It suits a woman who is already mourning her life." Mira stood her ground, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I am only here because of a debt that isn't mine," she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to remain stoic. Kim Yoon let out a sharp, jagged laugh that echoed through the vaulted ceiling. "A debt? Is that what Jackie told you?" She leaned in closer, the teal and orange light of the sunset casting long, distorted shadows across her sharp features. "Jackie Hu didn't sell you to pay a debt, Mira. He sold you to get rid of the evidence. He needed you gone so he could finally claim his place by my side without the stench of his past clinging to him." Mira shook her head, her mind reeling. "Jackie loves me. He's coming for me." "He's not coming for a maid," Kim Yoon hissed, her expression shifting from mockery to a cold, jagged triumph. She placed a gloved hand over her stomach, a slow, mocking smile spreading across her lips. "He has a legacy to think about now. He has a future." She paused, letting the silence stretch until it was suffocating. I'm pregnant, Mira. Dee's child, the heir to my father's empire, is growing inside me while you sit here polishing spoons for a monster. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The image of Jackie's gentle smile flashed in Mira's mind, now twisted into a mask of betrayal. The debt, the rescue, the promises of a wedding, it was all a curated lie. She felt a single, hot tear streak down her cheek, mirroring the terror she felt as the reality of her isolation set in. "You're lying," Mira whispered, but the conviction in Kim Yoon's eyes was undeniable. "Check his accounts, check the dates," Kim Yoon sneered, turning on her heel to leave. "You were just the help, Mira. I am the prize. Enjoy your castle. It's the only home you have left." As the doors slammed shut, Mira collapsed against the cold stone, the weight of the gilded cage finally breaking her spirit. The heavy iron gates of the castle's underground training wing creaked open, revealing a world of cold concrete and the sharp, metallic scent of gunpowder. Will Chang walked with a predatory grace, his footsteps echoing against the walls as he led Mira Jada toward the private shooting range. Mira followed, her heart hammering against her ribs, her hands trembling as she smoothed the fabric of her dark garment. The luxurious isolation of the upper floors felt like a distant dream compared to the raw, violent energy of this place. Will stopped in front of a sleek black handgun resting on a velvet-lined table. He didn't look at the weapon. His intense, predatory eyes were fixed entirely on Mira. He leaned in close, the warmth of his breath ghosting against her ear, mirroring the high-stakes tension of their first encounter. "In my world, Mira, there is no middle ground," he whispered, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "You are either the predator or you are the prey. And right now, you're still waiting for someone to eat you." Mira looked at the target at the end of the range, a paper silhouette that looked hauntingly like a man. "I don't want to be either," she said, her voice cracking as a single, glistening tear escaped and streaked down her cheek. She thought of Jackie, of the peaceful life she had envisioned, and the crushing weight of the debt he had traded her for. Will stepped behind her, his large frame enveloping her small stature. He reached around, his hands steady and calloused as they guided hers toward the weapon. The contrast was stark, his high-end, matte black tailored suit against the delicate white lace of her collar. "Jackie Hu didn't save you, Mira. He sold you because he knew you were too soft to fight back," Will said, his grip tightening as they lifted the gun together. "If you want to survive the wolves like Kim Yoon, you have to learn to bite." He adjusted her stance, his body a solid wall of heat against her back. The dual-toned atmospheric lighting of the range cast long, moody shadows across their features. "Focus," he commanded. "The world is orange and teal, bright targets and cold shadows. Choose which one you want to be." Mira squeezed her eyes shut for a second, feeling the cold weight of the metal. When she opened them, her eyes were wide and glassy, but the terror was beginning to harden into something else. Under Will's guided pressure, she pulled the trigger. The deafening roar of the shot shattered the silence, the recoil jolting through her arms and into her chest. The paper silhouette tore in the center. Will didn't move away. He stayed in the shadow of her neck, watching the smoke curl from the barrel. "Again," he whispered, "until you stop crying. Until you realize that I'm the only one who will ever give you the power to stay alive." In that moment, the gilded cage of the castle felt less like a prison and more like a fortress. And Mira realized the maid she once was dying with every bullet fired. The neon lights of the underground casino flickered like dying stars, casting jagged shadows across the velvet-draped walls. Mira's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird seeking exit from a cage. She had managed to slip away from Will's fortress-like villa during a shift change, driven by a desperate text from Jackie. "I have the money. I can buy us back. Meet me at the Red Lotus," it had read. She pushed through the heavy gilded doors, the air thick with the scent of expensive cigars and desperation. In the far corner, tucked away in a dimly lit booth, she saw him. Jackie looked disheveled, his eyes darting toward the entrance with a twitchy energy that Mira mistook for fear for her safety. "Jackie," she whispered, rushing to his side. She reached for his hand, her eyes filling with tears of relief. "I thought I'd never get away. Will, he's obsessed, Jackie. We have to go, now." But Jackie didn't stand up. He didn't pull her into his arms. Instead, he slowly withdrew his hand from hers, his gaze falling to the table. "I'm sorry, Mira," he muttered, his voice devoid of the warmth she had clung to for years. "The debt was too high. They said if I brought you here, they'd let me walk." The blood drained from Mira's face. "What are you talking about?" "He's talking about your retirement, darling." A sharp feminine voice cut through the noise. Mira spun around to see Kim Yoon stepping out from the shadows of a private alcove. She looked every bit the Mafia princess, flawless, cold, and lethal. Behind her stood 3 men in charcoal suits, their hands resting ominously inside their jackets. Kim Yoon walked toward them, her heels clicking like a countdown on the marble floor. She leaned down, pressing a possessive hand onto Jackie's shoulder, and he didn't flinch. "You really thought a man like Jackie would choose a maid over a kingdom?" Kim Yoon sneered, her eyes raking over Mira with pure vitriol. "He's been mine for months. You were just his insurance policy, a pretty little thing to sell when the bills came due." Mira looked at Jackie, her voice a broken thread. "Is it true? All those years? You're just selling me?" Jackie finally looked up, but there was no remorse in his eyes, only a hollow cowardice. "A man's got to survive, Mira." "Enough talk," Kim Yoon snapped, her face hardening. She signaled to the hitmen. "The Tucker family has taken too much interest in this girl. Make sure she's not a problem for my wedding anymore. Take her to the basement. I want her to understand exactly what happens to trash who tries to climb too high." As the hitmen moved in, grabbing Mira's arms with bruising force, she realized with a sickening clarity that the monster in the castle had told her the truth. The man she loved was the one holding the knife, and she had just walked straight into her own execution. The air in the abandoned warehouse was thick with the scent of ozone and copper. Mira huddled behind a rusted shipping crate, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The setup had been perfect. Jackie's desperate voice over the phone, the promise of a quiet meeting to discuss their escape, and the sudden, terrifying arrival of Kim Yoon's hitmen. She had almost believed him again. Almost let that old debt of gratitude pull her back into the abyss. A shadow flickered across the concrete floor, followed by the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of a suppressed weapon. A scream died in Mira's throat as a man in a dark-tailored suit vaulted over her cover, his movements a blur of lethal precision. It was Will. He moved through the chaos not like a man in a fight, but like a predator clearing his territory. Every shot he fired was a testament to his obsession. He wasn't just fighting a rival family, he was reclaiming his possession. "Stay down," Will commanded, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the floorboards. He didn't look back as he took down the last of the gunmen, his focus entirely on the perimeter until the silence finally returned to the hollow space. As the adrenaline began to ebb, Mira felt the sting of a deep graze on her forearm, sustained during the initial ambush. She hissed in pain, clutching the wound. Will was at her side in an instant, his stern expression softening into something dangerously close to concern. He reached into the inner pocket of his matte black blazer and pulled out a square of fabric, beginning to bind her arm with practiced ease. As he tightened the knot, the teal and orange lighting of the warehouse caught the fabric. Mira froze. It was a delicate white silk handkerchief, aged but pristine, with a very specific, intricate crest embroidered in the corner. The Tucker family crest. The world seemed to tilt. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Will paused, his intense, predatory eyes meeting hers. "I've carried it for years. I used one just like it to stop your bleeding the night of the West Street shootout. You were wearing a butterfly clip in your hair, looking at me with those same terrified eyes." Mira's breath hitched. For years, Jackie had claimed he was the one who pulled her from the wreckage that night. He had built their entire relationship on that lie, using her sense of debt to keep her submissive while he drained her bank account and sold her to his creditors. But the handkerchief Jackie had shown her back then was a cheap imitation. This was the original. The truth crashed over her like a freezing wave. Jackie hadn't saved her. He had only arrived late enough to take the credit. The monster standing before her, the man she had feared and fought, was the true architect of her survival. As a single glistening tear streaked down her cheek, Mira looked up at Will, finally seeing past the Mafia Boss to the savior who had been watching from the shadows all along. Jackie's debt was a lie, but her connection to Will was written in blood. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Soul Ballroom cast a cold, sharp light over the assembly of predators. Mira stood at the top of the marble staircase, her breath hitching as Will's hand settled firmly on the small of her back. She felt like a lamb being led into a den of wolves. Her dress, a masterpiece of midnight silk, clung to her skin like a second shadow, while the heavy diamond choker around her neck felt less like jewelry and more like a collar. "Head up, Mira," Will whispered, his voice a low vibration against her ear that sent a shiver of pure terror through her. "Tonight, you aren't a maid. You are the reason they will learn to fear the name Chang." As they descended, the rhythmic clinking of champagne glasses died into a heavy, suffocating silence. Every eye in the room, sharp, calculating, and lethal, was fixed on her. Mira saw the way the men gripped their canes like hidden weapons, and the way the women tracked her movement with predatory precision. In this world, she was the ultimate prize, a symbol of Will's absolute power. They reached the center of the floor just as the music swelled into something dark and operatic. Will didn't wait for an introduction. He signaled for silence with a single, sharp gesture. "To my guests and my enemies," Will announced, his voice carrying with a terrifying, calm authority. "Many of you have spent weeks whispering about my latest acquisition. Let the rumors end here. Mira Jada is not a guest in my home. She is the queen of it. Any insult to her is a declaration of war against me." The declaration hit the room like a physical blow. A low snarl broke the silence from the far corner where the Stanley and Hu delegations stood. Kim Yoon stepped forward, her face a mask of hyper-realistic fury, her eyes wide and glassy with a hatred that mirrored the single, glistening tear Mira had shed nights ago. "A queen?" Kim Yoon spat, her voice trembling with lethal intent. "You would put a crown on a common servant? You've insulted every family in this room, Will." Beside her, Jackie Hu looked on with a desperate, frantic greed, his eyes darting between Mira and the exit. The air grew thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the metallic tang of impending violence. "She is mine," Will countered, his grip on Mira tightening, his eyes turning predatory. The transition was instantaneous. A chair was kicked back, a glass shattered against the marble, and the teal and orange cinematic glow of the ballroom was suddenly broken by the flash of drawn steel. The Gala of Wolves had begun, and as the first shot echoed through the hall, Mira realized that being a queen meant being the first target in a war that was only just beginning. The air inside the ballroom was thick with the scent of lilies and gunpowder, a lethal cocktail that signaled the end of the piece. The Gala of Wolves had transformed from a display of power into a slaughterhouse. Will's hand was a steady, grounding weight on Mira's waist, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the white lace of her collar, now damp with the cold sweat of terror. He leaned in, his breath hot against her ear, his predatory eyes scanning the balconies with a calculated intensity. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice a low vibration of authority. But the doors burst open before she could respond. Kim Yoon didn't come for a negotiation. She came for a massacre. The rival family's daughter stood at the threshold, her eyes burning with a manic, vengeful light that mirrored the betrayal Mira had felt when she learned Jackie's true nature. The assault was instantaneous. Glass shattered as high-caliber rounds tore through the crystal chandeliers, plunging the room into a chaotic dance of orange light and moody shadows. Mira's vision blurred with tears as the hyper-realistic horror of the moment took hold, her eyes wide and glassy as she stared at the carnage. Will didn't hesitate. He pulled her flush against his chest, his body acting as a living shield against the rain of lead. "You're mine, Mira," he hissed, not as a threat, but as a vow. High above, a red laser dot danced across Mira's chest, a sniper's mark from the Stanley family's payroll. Will saw it a fraction of a second before the trigger was pulled. With a guttural roar, he spun her around, throwing his weight into her. The crack of the rifle echoed through the hall, a sound more final than any wedding bow. Mira felt the impact vibrate through Will's frame. A single, glistening tear streaked down her cheek as she watched him stumble. The man who had kept her locked in a gilded cage, the monster she was supposed to hate, was now bleeding onto her lace collar. He had traded his life for hers, proving in one heartbeat that his obsession was the only thing in her world that was real. As he collapsed, pulling her down with him into the cool shadows, Mira realized the debt she owed was no longer to the man who sold her, but to the man who was willing to die to keep her. The air in the castle infirmary was thick with the scent of antiseptic and lilies, an ironic blend of the violence they had survived and the future they were about to claim. Will lay against the propped-up pillows of his medical bed, his face pale from blood loss, but his eyes burning with the same predatory intensity that had first terrified Mira. His hand, wrapped in white gauze where a Stanley family bullet had grazed him, reached out for hers. Mira didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, her dark garment with its delicate white lace collar rustling in the silence of the room. The single tear that had once signaled her terror was long gone, replaced by a crystalline clarity. Outside these stone walls, the world was in chaos. The Stanley family had been dismantled, their influence bled dry, and Jackie Hu had been cast into a nameless exile to rot in the debts he had tried to pin on her. For the first time in her life, Mira wasn't acting out of a debt of gratitude to a liar. She was acting out of a choice. The priest stood at the foot of the bed, his voice a low murmur as he began the ancient rites. Will's gaze never left Mira's face. "I told you I would make you beg for my love," he whispered, his voice raspy but triumphant. "But in the end, it was I who bled for yours." Mira squeezed his hand, her thumb tracing the line of his pulse. She had once feared this man as a monster, a sick, controlling freak who kept her locked in a gilded cage. But as the vows were read, she realized the cage had become her fortress. The nice guy who claimed to love her had sold her for scraps, while the monster had handed her a card worth 50 million and a gun to protect her own life. "Do you, Mira Jada, take Will Chang?" the priest droned on. "I do," Mira interrupted, her voice ringing with a newfound agency. She wasn't just accepting a husband, she was accepting her own obsession. She leaned in close to his ear, mirroring the way he had once cornered her in the shadows of her old life. The teal and orange light of the setting sun filtered through the high infirmary windows, bathing them in a cinematic glow. As Will pulled her down for a kiss that tasted of iron and silk, Mira knew the maid was dead. In her place stood a woman who had finally learned that in the Tucker territory, you either rule or you are ruled. She chose to rule at his side. The ceremony ended not with a celebration, but with a silent, blood-bound promise. She was his, and he was hers, until death, or their enemies, parted them. In a world of shadows, Mira Jada learned the hardest lesson of all. The person who claims to love you might be the one holding the knife, while the one you fear might be the only one willing to bleed for you. Mira stopped being a maid and became a legend because she finally chose truth over comfort. If you enjoyed this journey of betrayal and dark obsession, subscribe and like for more. Share this with your friends and tell us in the comments, would you stay in the castle or run back to the lies? Turn on post notifications to stay updated on our next epic story.